Hi, I'm Ben Brownlee for Boris Effects. Silhouette 2023 introduced a new keyer into Silhouette, Primatte. Let's take a look at how we get started with using it and also how we expand that into a bigger green screen workflow. If we start in Silhouette now, I have my session set up. I have a little bit of green screen footage, which we can see here. Nothing, too much to note about that. Maybe there's a little bit of nastiness in the top left-hand corner and a little bit over on the right-hand side, but generally speaking, it's a pretty flat green screen. We do have the added complexity of some hair though, so we need to pay close attention to that as we start to work through this shot. So I'm going to come into key now, my key category, and I'm going to pick up my Primatte keyer, and I'll just bring this into here. And as we can see, Primatte has a number of different inputs. We have the main foreground image, we have a background image, we also have a holdout matte and a garbage matte, and we'll come to these a little bit later. So let's pipe in our background clip into our background there. So there's our background clip, there's our foreground clip, and let's take a little look. So coming down to our parameters window at the bottom, we have our main toolbar at the top. So currently we have this set to eyedropper, so we can start to sample what it is that we want to take away as green, but I'm not going to do that. Let's undo that, because staring us right in the face is this big auto analyze button. And this is where I would tend to start. So hitting the auto analyze will then let Primatte look at the clip and then figure out what it actually is that the main background is that you want to remove. And as we can see here, it does a pretty good job, but our background is a lot smaller than our session size. So let's do a couple of things to bring this up to the same size, and then we can start to look at the key a bit more. Now coming over to our background, probably the easiest way of changing this up is going to be like a resize. You could use a transform or something here as well. And I'll just come down to the bottom and I'll say 3840 by whatever it's going to be. So I'll let that automatically choose that there. And we're going to blur the background. Again, we've got, several different types of blur, but if we're working with a standalone version of Silhouette, we also have access to the Sapphire plugin set as well. So that gives us things like rack defocus, which I really like for doing this particular type of job, because it just means I can do things like create a lens, change my lens shape, add in a bit of lens noise, change the bokeh here as well. And if I wanted to, I can come down and sort of increase the highlights and things, but we're not going to see too much difference with this particular shot because we have like quite a burnt out background anyway. All right, with that in place, let's come into Primatte one more time and take a little look here. Let's open this up, because it's at this point that I want to just draw attention to our Primatte preview. So this is just a visual representation of what's happening within our key at the moment. And probably the best way of thinking about this is just to go back to the manual, because this is where Primatte works a bit differently than other keyers. Instead of coming in and just basing something off of a RGB value or just a basic color value, what it's doing instead is it constructs a bigger 3D space that is being described by three concentric partial spheres. So we have this push and pull between the different spheres, which means we get a much better and more fine-tuned result than we get with other keyers. And these zones are represented in this preview as well, if you want to go deep into that. But coming back to our key now, the auto analyze does a lot of the work, but it doesn't do all of the work. So if we take a quick look up at the top in our viewer, you can see we have a number of different types of views to look through, including final key, which is the RGB of what we're keyed out with an alpha channel. We have the final composite, which is the foreground plus the background as well. And then we have the matte status, which is an extremely useful view because it shows us a very simplified version of what's actually happening with the key. So any pixel that is entirely keyed out, entirely transparent, is black. Any pixel that is completely opaque is white. And any pixel that has even the remotest amount of transparency is grey. So this means that we can take a little look at our background and start to clear that up. You'll notice in the toolbar, we've automatically gone to the background cleanup tool. So that means I can just come in here and just clean up my background just with a few strokes interactively there. The other thing I can do is come over to my toolbar and go to foreground cleanup or clean foreground, and I can just go over the areas which are now not keyed out on the foreground. Now, what the matte status view doesn't show is obviously how transparent or opaque the grey pixels are. So at this point, I want to have a look at my final key and go up to final matte, and this will show us the matte that we have here. Now take a little look at this area. We can see that we've keyed this out, but let's zoom in even further. This isn't a nice, smooth kind of area. We have a bit of noise in the matte. And the reason for that is that we have a bit of noise in the clip. So before we go too far down this route, we're actually going to denoise our green screen plate. So if I hit the tab to go into the quick search and just type in denoise or denoise, then we have denoiser ML. So this is our machine learning denoiser. And really we only have a couple of different parameters for this. So we choose what model we're looking for. I've currently got, compression plus noise V1 or camera noise V1, and camera noise tends to do very well on these types of cameras. So just getting rid of, general sensor noise. And if I zoom in even further and we look at the green channel here, I can just take a look at the before and the after, before and the after, and that's just helping to ease those out there. So when we come back into Primatte, with denoiser off, it looks like this, and with denoiser on, it looks like this. So much better. So denoise your plates. Now we're at this stage where everything's looking pretty good. The temptation is just to start moving on from here, but I would counsel just to come and have a look now and see what it looks like when it's playing back, because there might be areas or there might be frames where things aren't working, absolutely perfectly how we want them. So by having a little look at this, we can take a look and see if there are any issues that we've got going for us. And we'll let that render through for a second. And when that's rendered out, we can now take a look and see that there are a couple of moments where things don't look quite right. So we've got a few frames there and a few frames there. And it might be difficult to see on the matte exactly what's going on. So let's take a little look at the final key again. Ah, yes, that explains it. We have actually got a light going across the foreground there at that point. So that's what's coming in and mucking up the result. Now, when we're at this stage, we probably don't want to just keep hitting this clean background and clean foreground tools just to try and wipe this mess up. We're going to start to move along to the other tools now. So the next one in the list is the spill sponge. We're gonna miss this. We're gonna skip over this one, and we're gonna go instead to the matte sponge. So I can just click on this, and if I just take a little sponge over my matte, you can see how this cleans up this particular area without affecting the overall kind of image and sort of overkeying or underkeying. And this goes back to those different zones that we were looking at, because we have things like the matte sponge, which just starts carving out between zones. So if we play this through, that key is now looking a lot nicer. All right, so it's at this point that we can start to look at our composite. So we've pulled what looks like a nice matte, but if we take a look at the composite here, there are obvious problems. We're going to, obviously look at the first big one, which is this big green halo around everything. And this is obviously going to be the green spill. Now, the temptation is to go into our spill sponge and start to try to soak all of that spill up. Yeah, we could do that, but I'm going to show you a different way. I'm going to show you a faster way. I'm going to come down now, past my fine tuning, past my adjust light, and into spill. So currently we have automatic spill removal, and it's looking at a complementary color and sort of pushing that back. We can set this to a solid color. Let's show you what that looks like. So take a look at the hair over in the corner here. So this is complementary. So complement, solid color is just going to turn that whole thing a single color. This case, going to turn it gray. Kind of suck that up. Ugh. The other one we have is a softened background. So this starts to bring some of the background colors back in again. And the other one we have is none. So let's just turn that on for a second. So this is actually how much spill we still have in the image. So there's quite a lot of green coming through, especially in those transparent areas. Now I'm going to shock you, and I'm going to leave this spill set to none because I want to come down to secondary spill. So this is another module within Primatte, and I'm just going to hit enable on there, and I want you to look at what happens. That cleans up all of that spill and makes it look really nice. Don't worry too much about this thick, heavy line that's going across the whole image. We're going to look at that in a second. There's a reason for that. But we have gotten rid of our spill there completely, and I haven't had to touch anything else. We can come in and we can sort of fine tune this, and we can fine tune the bias a little bit as well, but I'm just going to leave everything auto. Working our way down now, I'm going to skip over matte refinement. Again, we're going to come back to this because I want to take a look at edge cleaner. So edge cleaner is really useful when we have things like strands of hair, because they can easily turn into big sort of clumps of hair, and usually what we have to do then is chain multiple keys together, sort of add those all together to sort of work on different hair clumps to get that looking really nice. Let's take a look at what we can do with edge cleaner. So at its default settings, it just sort of softens everything up. We've got a radius of 4, which is quite small for something like this. I'm going to look at this in terms of our final key, because I think this is going to be most useful to see it. So as I turn this up, it starts to soften that out, but we start to get more detail coming into the strands. So if we turn the radius up, and we also turn the alpha contrast up and the edge sensitivity up, this is the important one, edge sensitivity. I usually have that, really, really quite high with hair, something around about 95, 97, that sort of area. You can see if I bring my radius up now, it's being really good at finding and separating out those individual hair strands. So edge cleaner off, edge cleaner on, I'll turn on temporal smoothing as well, so we don't get any sort of flicker. Now we could start to bring up the contrast again with alpha contrast, but I'm going to leave that set down to 0 because I want to deal with that in matte refinement. So matte refinement is where we can come in and start to make bigger changes to our matte. So we'll do things like shrink and grow, or blur, which blurs inwards and outwards, or we can do a wrap, which just blurs things inwards. But all I'm going to do here is use the black clip and the white clip just to bring back that contrast within the matte. Anything that the edge cleaner started to sort of bring out. So I'm going to take a snapshot of this, and I'm going to turn off edge cleaner and matte refinement. And I'm going to show you the before and after. So before and after. So we start to get more definition happening within inside those hair strands. Now I understand this shot still has some heavy edge outlines. Again, don't worry about this. We are going to sort that a little bit later. Before we do that though, I'm going to come in. I'm going to look at my next ones, which are holdout matte and garbage matte. So holdout mattes are a way of keeping in important information. So say for example, we had something that was very reflective and that was getting keyed out. You want to always keep that in. So we're going to create a matte to keep that in. We use that as a holdout matte. Or we could use a garbage matte to get rid of something in the clip that we don't want to ever be there. So that could be something like, rig removal type of things, or just in this case, if we take a look at the original, we've got that gap in the top left-hand corner of the screen that we want to get rid of. So we can do that very easily. Let's come in here. I'm going to use a roto node. And just have this out on its own. And I'm just going to use a ellipse tool. And I'll just use an ellipse tool to just get rid of this top right hand corner. So then I can pipe my rotor node into the final input of the Primatte, which is going to be the garbage matte. So let's rearrange this a little bit. If I come into Primatte now, take a look at my final key. That's gone. There it is if I change the blend mode. But we want to just keep this at subtract. So that's all good. Now, Primatte in Silhouette has some other modules that are all to do with color. So we have things like color correct and light wrap and edge color correct as well. And these are all to do with being able to do color directly within the single node. Now we could of course just split these out and do these on separate nodes if you wanted to. We have all of the tools to do that. But if you just need something quick, let's just show you what that looks like. So I can come into color correct, I'll enable this module, and maybe I'll just bump up the brightness, change the temperature up a little bit, be a bit cooler, take the saturation down, maybe add a tiny amount of blue gain in there as well. Don't need to do a lot. I'm not going to do a lot. That's fine. So there's the before, there's the after. If we can just be using this to get a rough idea of whether a background is going to work or not as well. And then we can come to light wrap. And we have two different versions of light wrap. We have regular light wrap, which is going to light wrap the whole image, or we have light wrap spill, which is just going to be affecting the spill colors. So I'm going to choose light wrap spill here. I'm going to enable this. and I can choose whether I want to take in my background input as the light wrap source, or whether I just want a solid color here. Now, the advantage, of course, to having the background input in is that things start to look a bit more natural, because it looks like we have a softened version of the background, or light scattered from the background hitting onto the green screen subject's face, or, you know, reflecting back off of the background and onto the subject you're putting in there. And to see where this is actually working, let's zoom in somewhere where we actually do have some spill suppression happening. Again, this little lock of hair is usually pretty good. So with that off and then that on, it's kind of subtle. We have softness, which is how much we're going to be softening the background. We have lightness. We have width of how much it's going to be extending through. And then we have a blend mode here to see just how much that's going to be blending in. We then have like the main light wrap as well. So if I enable this, it has the same, there we go, it has the same controls: source, background input, and solid color. We have softness, how much we're softening up the background, and we have lightness and width and the same blend mode. So if I take the width up quite high, you can start to see, especially around the phone area, the sort of the light wrapping around and hitting the edges of the face and the edges of the hand there. And I'll use the blend with original just to find a happy medium there. Lovely. Now, we've still got that issue of the hard edge, and edges are where the keying and the compositing is most important, because that's where you're going to notice it. Something in here called edge color correct. I'll show you what that does briefly. It's a color correction tool that, guess what, it works on the edges. So that's the basics of working with Primatte, where we start to hit auto analyze and then use the tools to further refine our matte. We can just leave it there, or alternatively, you can come and join me on the second part of this tutorial, where we start to look at a bigger workflow and see how we can start to use things like the color estimation node to bring in those edges and make everything look a lot more kind of complete. All right, I hope to see you in part 2, but if this is the end of our journey, then thank you very much, and I'll see you very soon. If you want to learn more about Primatte or grab a free trial version of Silhouette, then head over to boriseffects.com. You'll find hours of free training over there for all of the Boris Effects products. My name is Ben Brownlee for Boris Effects. I'll see you again soon.